Hey, this is Jeanette from New Wave Knitting. Today I'm going to show you how to strategically weave in the ends of a sock to make sure that everything is secure and neatly finished. Now this tutorial is technically for my staple sock knitting pattern, but really they're techniques that you can use with any sock pattern. But if you're interested, you can get more details about my pattern in the description below with links to purchase. Here I have a finished staple sock, which I have turned inside out to get a good look at all the ends we have to weave in. And there are three key areas where you will likely have to weave in ends. First is the cuff, which is where you cast on. Second is the heel, which you may have changed colors for, so you might have a lot of ends here. But even if you didn't change colors, you might notice a gap at the corner of your heel, where basically your heel meets your instep, and we're gonna fix that whether or not you have an end here. And then the third is the toe area, which if you haven't touched your ends yet since you cast off or bound off, then that end is likely on the right side of your work. You may also have additional ends within the leg and foot of the sock if you change colors or had to join a new ball of yarn. For those, you can just use your usual weaving and end technique, but for the three key areas, the cuff, heel, and toe, I'm going to show you how to effectively weave in those ends to make sure that your finished sock doesn't unravel, but also looks nice and neat. Now, if you knit the staple sock, you should either have a ribbed cuff like I have here, or a folded cuff like this. And I'm going to give you some tips for weaving in these ends for both types of cuffs. Let's start with the ribbed cuff, and I'm going to show you my favorite way to weave in the end. First step is to thread your tapestry needle with the end. And then what we're going to do is find a knit column near where the end is. So for me, my end is right here, and I'm looking at this for the knit column, but this could also be a good choice here, but I'm going to go with this one. And all I'm going to do is insert my tapestry needle from one side to the other, doesn't matter really which way, but through that knit stitch, through kind of like the upside down V, if you will. And we can look at it this way as well, where you can see I'm inserting it through the V. This actually probably looks a little bit better. And I'm just gonna bring that yarn through. And then once my yarn is pulled through, I'm going to insert my tapestry needle going the opposite direction through the next V in the knit column, like so. And you're just gonna keep zigzagging your way down the knit column. And this is my favorite technique really for weaving in an end along any kind of ribbing. It's just super easy. And so you're kind of going to go down and do this for about an inch or so. I'm going to just adjust my work here to make it a little easier for me to go up and down. All right, and this is going to be my last one. So I'm going through this last stitch here. I've worked down about 1.5 inches or 4 centimeters. So now I'm going to work my way back up the column of stitches. So I just went top down for this stitch, and I'm just going to work my way back up going this way up through the column of stitches. And it might be a little bit more difficult because you did weave in some yarn, but honestly, if your yarn catches on previous yarn and kind of goes through what you did, that really helps to lock in that end. And it makes your end very secure. And I'm just working up the knit column. I'm just going to work up until a couple of rows below the actual edge. So this will be my last one. So I'm not going to work all the way up to the top, but I'm going to leave a little bit of space here. And then I'm just going to trim the end. You can tighten it up, but that end is nice and hidden on the inside of your sock. Tension looks fine on the outside, and everything is nice and secure. If you worked a folded cuff, you can weave in your ends as normal along the leg of the sock. I would recommend keeping it close here to the fold line, because once you do about 1 inch or so of weaving in, what I recommend doing is just imagine that I have an end attached to this and it's woven through my tapestry needle. What I would do is just insert it into the folded cuff, and make sure you're not going through, but you're kind of like in the middle on the inside. And just work your way through the folded cuff as kind of like as far as you can go, really. That's probably good. Again, make sure you're not poking through the other side. And pull your yarn through. So imagine I have yarn here that's coming through. I pull it tight, and then I trim it really close to the folded cuff. And then you can just like pull your folded cuff, and that end should disappear inside. So your end is nice and secure inside the folded cuff. Now let's move on to the heel. The heel is probably the trickiest spot. And again, if you change colors for your heel, you probably have quite a few ends around the heel here. So you'll be weaving all of those in. But the main thing that we're going to address is if you have a gap in the corner of your heel. And you might have this gap even if you did not change colors like me. But here's what we're going to do to fix it. Now, if you did change colors for your heel, you should have lots of ends right in this section. So just go ahead and grab one of those and weave it through your tapestry needle. I could use one of these. You could use one that's nearby and just kind of like work your way up. So that is an option for me. But I'm going to show you what I would do if I don't have any ends nearby to work with. And what I'm going to do is basically just use a length of yarn and thread it through a tapestry needle. And I have probably 10 inches or so here. You might want more than that. This is actually just what I snipped off from my cuff end. And I think this will be enough, but you might want a little bit more, probably about a forearm's length. If you are working with one that's attached to your sock, basically weave in your ends to get closer to the gap. And what I'm going to do, since I'm adding a new piece of yarn, is add it in close to where the gap is and work through a few stitches just to really secure this end before we get to the main work we're going to do. So I'm going to add it on the instep section here and work my way over this way. I'm going to leave a little bit of an end here, nothing much, because we'll just be able to snip this in the end once we're done. But I'm just following the smiles and the umbrellas to get to the gap. Okay, so I have worked my way over to this gap here. If you take a look around it, you'll notice that there are plenty of stitches that essentially circle it. So what we are going to do is weave our end in a circle around the gap to cinch it closed. So insert your tapestry needle through some stitches around the sock. You might pull some up as you see fit. Just kind of work your way around. There's no like specific certain stitches you have to go through necessarily, but you do want to get as close to the edge of the gap as possible. So there, I've just worked my way around. This is the last one I'm going to go through. And once you've worked your way around, I went through about, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 stitches here. And so once I've worked my way around, I'm just gonna pull that yarn and you'll see we just cinched it closed. So I just turned my work inside out here to see where we worked. And I'm just double checking this to make sure everything looks good. Nothing looks too tight and the gap is successfully closed right here. So I'm going to turn my work back to the wrong side. And now that I've done that little check, what I'm gonna do is work my way around it, around where the gap was one more time. Ideally working through the same stitches, but if not, you know, whatever, not a big deal. And just to make sure everything is as secure as it can be. So I'm just kind of locating right now where I worked before. And yeah, I'm definitely actually not going into the exact same spots that I went before. It's a little different this time around, but that's totally fine.
The main goal here is to make sure everything is just secure. Okay, and I just pulled it a little bit more just to make sure it's really nice and cinch closed. And now all that's left to do is weave in our ends as normal to secure the end. And you can just weave it in another 2.5 centimeters or an inch just to get it secure. Now, one pro tip I have for you is to always aim to weave in your ends toward the top of the foot and avoid the bottom of the foot for 2 reasons. One is security, so the end itself will encounter less friction if woven in on the top compared to the bottom, where it would be stepped on and rubbed over and over, which could cause it to become undone. And the second reason is comfort. So you may not notice a difference either way, but for those with sensitive feet, you will thank yourself later if you don't feel that end every time you take a step. So weaving in on the top foot is especially important for those who have sensitive feet. Now, last but not least, let's tackle the toe. The end of your toe is likely sticking out on the right side of your sock. So what we are going to do for this is thread that end through your tapestry needle. And then take a look at where that end is coming from here. Pull it up, pull it around, and you'll likely find a gap really close between or within stitches that's really close to that end. So for me, that's right here I'm gonna go through. And you're just going to insert your tapestry needle through that gap or wherever you see it makes sense, and put your tapestry needle through to the wrong side. And I just inserted my hand into the sock. I'm just gonna pull that through here. And I'm just gonna check after I pull it through that it looks good on this side. And it does. It doesn't look like I have any like extra, well, it looks a little funky. Yeah, okay. I just had to get pulled a little bit tighter. It was a little sticking out, like kind of right here, but now it looks pretty natural. So all you have to do now, turn your sock back to the wrong side and weave your end in like normal. Again, aiming to weave in the end around the top of the foot. Now, if you have any other gaps in your knitting for your sock where you change colors, particularly maybe around the toe of the sock, if you did a contrast toe or anything like that, just make sure to tighten up if you made any knots or whatever color changes you did. And you can use the same technique that we did for the heel, for the gap, to close up any other remaining gaps for your sock.
And after all of your ends are woven in, it is now time to block your sock, which we will cover in the next tutorial. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you have any questions at all, please comment them below or send me an email at Jeanette@newwaveknitting.com. Happy knitting!